they are a consensus. They're literally in agreement, right? And people who don't agree, they've just formed another one. They have some change to the set of rules. They define a new consensus. So if a set of people decide they no longer want to be part of this group and they want to go over and create another group on their own, they take all their own stuff and they do that, who have they attacked? They just started doing something else. And so I remember I had this question, I won't use the name, but I had this discussion on Twitter, I think, with the famous Bitcoin guy. And I was like, look, so we're arguing this exact point, like look, who's hurting who here? I'm like, well, you know. So basically the argument is this is an attack. An attack means it's a crime, right? You can actually literally, you committed a crime. And there's really only, if you're a libertarian type anarchist, there's really only one crime, it's theft. So who stole from who? I took my node I used to accept money, and I changed some software on my computer, and I now interact with other people who want to use a different money with me. Who have I attacked? I haven't attacked anybody. Right? So I just left the consensus, which means now the original consensus is now smaller by my factor in the economy. So if half the consensus decided to go over and create a new one, now the original one is half as valuable. Right? The value of the money is strictly a function of the size of the economy, how much trade is occurring, and how many people are trading, because the number of people contributes to the security, and the amount of stuff being traded determines what you can buy with the money. Nobody will sell you anything it's worth. It's by definition worth less. So, okay, yeah, the economy got smaller, but if we're gonna argue that, well, it's a crime to leave the economy, to take your own computer and do what you want with it, then what the hell's the point of this whole system, right? Basically saying you can't do what you want with your own stuff. That's the whole point. We're trying to let people do what they want with their own stuff, and we're telling them it's a crime to do what you want with your own stuff. So I think it's a really contradictory position to argue that these things are attacks. Satoshi used the term attack for one thing, and one thing only. In the white paper anyway, it's subjective. Like he could use the word attack kind of vague. He could use it in various ways, but he used it to describe a 51% attack. Right, where you're doing it in order to steal from somebody. Right, you get something, you trade a car for Bitcoin, and then you work with some miners to roll that transaction back, and you keep the car, and you keep the Bitcoin. Okay, so it's a theft. It's not a break in the Bitcoin security model. It's just a theft. Right, but if you attempt to control the entire system by using a 51% attack, now it's a system level attack. But the only party that can afford to do that is a party that has basically an endless source of external money. Right? So that's the state, that's it. Okay, anyway, go on. Question? All right. You didn't ask me yet, right?
Just wondering about the economic thing, apart from the technology view. So you talked about POW is kind of really valid compared to proof of stake, right? And
secure.
Yes, security and the economic value, because it's kind of balanced out between security and the economic value, because it doesn't make sense if you just follow your own track.
Well, the only distinction I make so the question is, so proof of stake versus proof of work. Is it really just about security, or is there something else? And to me, the reason proof of stake doesn't make sense is because it doesn't provide security against a state attack. Right? It's just, right. You buy a half coin, you're done.
Right.
There's no way to get them out.
It involves with the cost, right? So you need to pay tomorrow.
Some people have to pay collectively to remove the state as the attacker, but with proof of stake, they can't. I don't even bother looking at any other aspect of proof of stake because it's kind of moot at that point. Why would you consider it? There may be other issues, but
yeah. So I was wondering, what will be happening when the Bitcoin overlays 99%? There's nothing more than to mine, because fees are going to be really higher.
No, well, fees will be a function of how many people are trying to use the money, and they'll go. So Satoshi used what we call inflation to distribute units of the coin rationally. Right, so it's got to have some way to get them out there. A random lottery is as good as any, right? So what you have is, you've allocated all this shares, right, the system, and units of Bitcoin. We've authorized them, and now we're going to allocate. We need some mechanism. So we roll the dice. That's what mining is. It's a random lottery. And so you give them some coins, based on doing this. It doesn't provide any security at a system level against 51% attack, but it gets the coins out there, and it also provides kind of a bootstrapping level of security in the early phases. It makes the chain costly to reverse. So even if it's not under it's not a state attack. We've got 51% attack going on. It secures the history. Right? It still provides a cost reverse, but ultimately, the fact that fees are the only thing left after inflation doesn't necessarily mean fees are going to be high. I mean, high is a relative term, but you have to have enough cost to make it too costly for the state to just shut the coin down. Right? So fees have to get that high, and how high that is not really knowable. But it is again a question of what people are willing to pay. But with layering, you can actually. So we're getting a whole other interesting subject. But how high can Bitcoin go in terms of price? Right? People have this topic I call the lunar fallacy that rests on top of another topic that describes the stability property of money in general. So, as with all monies except for Bitcoin, as the price, so the usability of the money rises as it becomes more valuable, people will make more of it. Every gold, paper, silver, any kind of money, you just produce more. And the only difference with fiat is that there's counterfeit laws that make it illegal for us to do that. They can make more, we can't. Right? But if there wasn't those laws, it just people would just make more dollars, and people would be very good for that purpose because you need truckloads of it to buy anything. But that's why gold's pretty good money because it's about the right amount to, as far as portability. Okay, so all these monies have the same property. Gets more valuable, you make more of it, which pushes the price back down. Right? It's inflationary. So all monies are inflationary except for Bitcoin. Right? There's no inflation in Bitcoin. Whether you consider the initial inflation or not, eventually it stops. Okay, there's no inflation. So people look at that and go, well, that means as it becomes more valuable, more usable, more people using it, bigger economy, et cetera, just prices goes up and up and up and up to the moon, right? Well, that never made sense to me. It took me a while to figure it out, but it actually doesn't make sense. What happens when the price of Bitcoin is rising? It implies more people are using it for more stuff. We assume it's going to rise, right? More demand. Okay, so more transactions. What happens to fees? Up. What happens when fees start getting from they go from, in dollar terms, pennies to dollars to $20, $100. We saw this, right? All of a sudden, people freak out. This thing's not worthless. It's not usable in all these scenarios. So there's a couple topics I've written up, on that alone. Which is there's this threshold where above which you can't use Bitcoin because the fees rise too much. Okay, so it's not inflationary, but it has the same effect. As it becomes more useful, there's a negative pressure on usability, which makes it stable. Right? That's what makes gold stable. It doesn't just keep going up. People make more of it. We can't make more Bitcoin, but as it goes up, it gets pushed back down because of fees. Gold doesn't have fees. Bitcoin has fees. So it's very unique in that respect as a money, but it does have stability. So what happens when the price rises to the point where fees basically make it unusable in all these scenarios, price drops back down, and okay, now we can't do any more transactions because nobody will use it. Well, that's where, presumably where layering starts to make a difference. So you can have fees rise even higher and do more transactions, but still have the per transaction cost lower. That's the idea behind layering. So that means that you can have much, much higher fees on chain, presumably, some amount higher, therefore more security. Right? That's what you want. I don't work on Lightning, so I don't talk too specifically about it, but that's the idea, right? Layering technologies allow you to basically batch up transactions, multiple transactions into one that actually hits the chain with a security trade-off, a local security trade-off. Like the people that are trading are making a trade-off, but the system is not making a trade-off. Right? Systematically, it's still secured in the same mandates. These are still Bitcoin transactions. So yeah, the idea is fees can continue to rise, but they can't rise forever because you still have that fee pressure still pushing up into the second layer, right? And so eventually you're going to hit a limit there too.
So on the topic of inflationary, deflationary currencies, I don't know tons about economics, but see, from what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's just a lot of experience in the world with inflationary currencies because pretty much all world currencies are inflationary, even gold to some degree. So Bitcoin is a bit different being inflationary, and I was just wondering if there's any major currency or form of currency that you can think of that is deflationary to use for an example.
We're mixing two concepts of monetary inflation and price inflation. Because so when you're talking about all monies are inflationary, all monies are monetarily inflationary. In other words, there can be more produced. Whether there is or not is not really the important thing. All things are inflationary. Everything you can make more of, presumably, right? With the right amount of money, which means as it becomes valuable enough, you make more. So all monies have been inflationary, but Bitcoin is not. You can't monetarily you can't produce any more units of the money. So it's unique. You can defeat it and change its rules, or make a new one, get rid of the old one, but you really change it. It may not be useful, but it's still not inflationary. So when it comes to price inflation, now when you're talking about deflationary, you're talking about price, not number of units. Right? There's not technically there is a continuous reduction in the number of units because of loss, but we tend to discount that as not a major factor. But it's monetarily deflationary because of the loss, right? And gold and other things, yeah, they have loss too, but we presume that then you just end up producing more to compensate for that, right? So from a monetary standpoint, kind of look at it, these things are inflationary, and Bitcoin's kind of not. And so it's deflationary monetarily if prices drop because supply is fixed and there's more use. So the price of things in Bitcoin tends to go down. Right. So it's true, but maybe I lost you.
No, I think I made a mistake. You pointed it out. I was confusing the supply.
Yeah, okay. So the reason for the confusion was was conflating those two terms. And people often do, right? Monetary inflation and price inflation are very distinct concepts, and they tend to get conflated.
But one leads to the other.
Right. Sorry?
But one leads to the other.
So, from a persistent standpoint, monetary inflation is what leads to price inflation.
How about usability? Because the POS and the whole other concepts, the Ethereum and the other things are really rushing out these days because people think Bitcoin soaked up all the investment and money itself. So actually, you're right. Energy is consumed by Bitcoin, so it stays there, but it's kind of traded by different value, like either Ethereum or the other coins, which makes kind of services, DX, and things like people actually using every day. But relatively, Bitcoin itself is more like gold mine. Just trade off and make another value to use in daily life. Well, we can just melt down gold, but Bitcoin is not. You know what I mean?
I'm sorry. I'm just not getting what your question is.
So I'm wondering what is the kind of usability of Bitcoin rather than trading and the monetary values and making money by mining.
Sorry, I didn't hear all the words. I don't hear very well anyway. So, yeah.
There's a couple. I'm missing a couple keywords. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what is the usability of Bitcoin? Because we are not really using Bitcoin in daily life, right?
Usability?
Yeah, usability. And the services on the app, it works to me, it works like gold mine. You can trade Bitcoin with other coins and then just make more ecosystem by DM or daily routine life. But by itself, Bitcoin, to me, it doesn't really make sense to make it economics by services or anything else.
Well, if nobody sells anything for Bitcoin, it's not worth it.
So that's what I mean. Only for trading. trading and making money.
But that's
by
trade.
mining. Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about like trading on exchanges.
Right.
I'm just talking about trade in general. It doesn't matter what the trade is, but something has to be traded for, or it's literally worthless. Right? So you seem to be suggesting that Bitcoin is good for trade in exchanges for buying other stuff, like other monies.
Yeah.
And maybe not so good for buying coffee or whatever.
Well, it doesn't necessarily. I mean, it doesn't necessarily to be, but is that correct concept that Bitcoin remains as a really gold mine, which could be the like dollar, working like dollar or gold, which is like base principle fundamental monetary, which can be traded into cryptocurrency in other economy.
Well, the question of other cryptocurrencies is itself an interesting topic, but generally speaking, not all monies are ideal for all types of transactions. And so, kind of what you seem to be speculating on is like what types of transactions is Bitcoin useful for? And there's not much of a means-based economy for Bitcoin right now. So it doesn't seem to be useful right now. Maybe because of user interface, usability, confirmation times, fees, whatever, for certain scenarios. But that's true of all monies, right? I mean, gold's not very good for some things. It doesn't move on the wire very effectively, and that's why Bitcoin's better in that scenario. But when you don't have a network, Bitcoin's not very useful. So silver, gold, if you have a very small value transaction, silver might be a better money because you can't carry around a small amount of gold. Or vice versa. If you have a very high value transaction, gold can be more useful because it's more portable. So there are certain scenarios where one money's better than another. My favorite is kind of like, it's an example. I don't mean to say anything specific about the different monies, but if you take like a private money, Zcash or something, right? Say it works, but it's more costly in terms of processing power, right? So maybe higher fees, more time, something, right? And then you have a Bitcoin, it's maybe lighter but less private. And there's no way to collapse these two. If you put them together, you still just get Zcash, right? So they may coexist, and there may be exchange between them. But that's really the only time where it makes sense long term to assume that multiple coins will coexist. People generally heard of Gresham's law, which is the bad money drives out the good. Basically, it sounds backwards, but there's an inverse of that, which is Thayer's law, which basically says in the absence of currency controls, the good money is what gets used, but bad money doesn't, but it's more costly to use. So Thayer's law basically says that all things being equal, it would just be one money. But things aren't equal. So they're like the silver gold scenario, there's maybe the Zcash Bitcoin scenario. Take like credit cards versus paper money. When you go do your illegal thing, you hit the ATM first and you get the paper money, right? And then if you have some left over, you can put it back in the bank and put it back in your, use it on your credit card. So there's this exchange that occurs between different types of money for different scenarios. And if you're interested in lots of different coins, and maybe other coins that look like Bitcoin but aren't, like say like Litecoin, Litecoin's a Bitcoin. It follows all those same principles that are described in the Bitcoin white paper. So I consider it an instance of Bitcoin. So why would there be two? We don't. Maybe there's less than there should be, unless there's some material difference that people can't combine, and that they're going to be willing to pay for it. Maybe Bitcoin's key feature benefit is that it's a good money to transfer between these different monies. I try not to speculate on those things, right?
Yeah, I agree. And my final question comes back to the point of security, because proof of stake and the other all the different method was trying to solve that real world issue. I mean,
what issue?
Real world issue. If you're going to use some services and things like that, POW doesn't really work at an enterprise level or service level to make all miners join the ecosystem. You know what I mean?
I don't understand. I mean, when you're using the money to buy and sell stuff, you're not performing proof of work, right? That miner's doing that somewhere else, and you're paying them for it. So I don't understand why that's an impact for the usability.
Oh, I'm saying that because when you release some new coins or new services, you make more participants inside, right? But not everybody want to mine to join the economy.
Sure, and they don't have to.
Right. So that's why there's to make proof of stake or different method to just kind of get rid of that.
But unfortunately, it can't be secure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what
So
is
why
the
bother?
suggestion for like usability in different world of.
Well, I mean, usability always comes second to, in the case of money, security, right? Money is a security system, basically, right? So if you can have a great, thing on top, but if it's not secure underneath, it's irrelevant. Right? I mean, again, we're honeymoon phase, right? Some of these things look like they're working. I can explain to you how easily they would be to terminate them, right? And that's really the point. So if you can make, it's hard to create a system that theoretically could prevent the state from doing what it does with money, which is tax you to it. And that's the key innovation of Bitcoin. And maybe it's not easy to make that cheap and easy. But if it's cheaper than the alternatives, it'll get used. And apparently it is, right? But we don't really know yet. It may not be worth it, right? It may be too expensive to get your transactions confirmed, except in the most extreme cases, and then you may not be able to build a big enough economy to actually fund its security. Just things we just don't have any, they're not provable, and we don't have any example of them actually happening. So when people hear me kind of give the basic my security talk on Bitcoin, they assume I'm a pessimist. Like, I don't think it's going to work, right? No, I'm just not a cheerleader. That's how I describe a lot of the ways people talk about Bitcoin. They just get up and tell you how wonderful it's going to be, and it's always secure, and it can't be this, can't be that. It's just nonsense. It's not. They're not explaining to you how. How exactly does that work, right? So I've explained to you how, and now we can go work on making the best system we can with that understanding. So I work on it. I've worked on it every day, pretty much for the last 5-ish years. So if I was a pessimist, I didn't think it could work, then I'd be doing that. That's not my perspective. But it also doesn't make sense to delude yourself about, I'm a businessman too, right? You don't sit there and lie to yourself about how your businesses work, right? You gotta understand it.
What do you think of federated sidechains as kind of an in-between for Coinbase versus completely on-chain transactions? Do you think that there's some middle ground there that's useful, or do you think it just inevitably is basically like decentralized Coinbase?
I don't work on sidechains, so I don't have to speak too much about the specifics of it. But
the concept in general.
Generally speaking, moving away from on-chain to off-chain, like Lightning, we're doing things off the chain. We can settle on the chain. We have certain not guarantees, but certain advantages in that approach. But what we're always talking about is moving things further away from the chain in a trade-off in terms of cost and usability. And that will always happen. I mean, we do the same thing with all kinds of other stuff. Existing financial system is layered in that way. So whether it's federated sidechains or Lightning, so there's downsides to all of them. They all have disadvantages and advantages. It's impossible to predict where we are, in the future with that kind of stuff. But all I can say is that if we're going to have any kind of higher volume activity, and we're going to have a system that's secure the way I described, which is through covert operation, then we're going to have to layer the system. I believe that, even though I don't work on layering technology. Cryptoeconomically, that's the only option that I see. You have to make a trade-off. Right? You have to trade some amount of security. You want to make that trade-off at a local level, on an individual transactor level, not at a system level, right? Just, you go to something that can't be done at small scale, you need a system-wide security compromise. If you do something like allow an individual on a per transaction basis to sacrifice a little bit of his own security in exchange for lower cost transaction, then, but you still kept the system so that it operates at the same scale as it did before, then you haven't made any compromises in system level security. You've allowed individuals to make their own compromises for the sake of their own cost reduction, which is economically rational. So that's really the essence of the big blocker debate, right? I think people do understand that pretty well. It's not like a novel concept. But I think that for the people who do understand it well, the fact that you can kind of stick with this idea that we don't need to operate at small scale, the only way you can justify that is by having a different understanding. So you can understand that you can't operate at small scale if you do certain things, but you might not care because your idea of the security model might be Bitcoin is secured by popularity. And this goes back to the old, my current quote, like state can't ban popular things. So if you make it popular, it doesn't matter how centralized you've made it, it's okay. But that's really what the kind of epic debate between the big blockers and others is really all about. And there's no perfect size. It's just a question of whether you can still operate at small scale. How many people can do that at a time? So what size should the blocks be? I can't think, what should the block interval be? These are arbitrary things, but at some point they start to matter.
Do you have an opinion on SPV, and so not so much the leaking privacy part of it, but the idea that just looking at the proof of work can tell us maybe whether a transaction is confirmed or not? Is that a reasonable assumption, or do you think it's terrible?
So to restate the question, do I believe that SPV is okay in terms of using proof of work instead of validating the entire?
Yeah. Do you think it's a reasonable trade-off for people? Like, let's say I was a Bitcoin user and I decided I'm going to use SPV forever for the next 10 years or whatever, and never fully validate it. Would you call it?
So no, it's interesting. The way SPV is implemented, privacy issues aside, right? It's reasonable. It's really odd. It's reasonable from an individual standpoint, and it's not reasonable from a system security standpoint, which makes it a little dangerous, right? Because if everybody had SPV wallets, every merchant just used SPV wallets. People mind, people use SPV. Who's validating? Nobody. Right? So it's a little bit problematic from a system security standpoint as you reduce the number of people who actually have economic, that are economically relevant and validating in a way that prevents people from spending bad money.
So is this like tragedy of the commons situation then?
No, because tragedy of the commons refers to the state owning property, and therefore people using as much as they can because they're not paying for it, right? But I guess there's a similar concept there. But whenever anybody asks me tragedy of the commons question, I ask, well, okay, it's not the state, that it doesn't really make sense. At least historically, the definition of the problem. But you have a situation where somebody's got to validate it. It is in people's self-interest to do so, right? So it's not. So they do so. There are certainly important economic actions to do so. But that's the downside. If there is a downside to SPV, it's that merchants who matter, or every merchants basically stop validating. That there's enough of that not nobody validates. But okay, so what happens then? It's kind of like it's too centralized, right? What's happened is you've removed yourself from the consensus. You're just trusting the miner to proof of work, right? So you're hoping somebody else is doing it, but you're really not part of the Bitcoin security model anymore. The node that you're trusting is for itself, but you basically it's like from a security standpoint, from this aspect of the security standpoint, it's like pushing all your money up into Coinbase and letting them be the one node. So, again, if you put the thumb screws on their CEO, now they're no longer relevant. All the people who trust them are basically no longer economically relevant because the rules have changed. Nobody can say anything about it because they're all just trusting that those rules have been validated. So, but when that happens, now when those rule changes are applied, it starts to matter, and now people can go out and validate, and they can solve that problem, just like they could, with decentralizability is what matters, really, not as much as decentralization, because things are going to be fairly centralized when it's not under attack. But the danger is, this is where developers, and crypto economists can have an important role. The danger is that you build the system in such a way that you assume it's never going to be under attack. You build it so that, like, say, everybody's doing this, right? And it could never fix itself. That's really the greater hazard. Is if people, if we become too complacent, we accept, design changes over time that basically make it impossible to correct. And it's very tempting to do, and there have been tons of those types of compromises made in other coins. That's why we call them shitcoins. I mean, they may be worse than they may actually work, but they're flawed. Not all of them. I mean, some are not cheap. They're just different.